Did you say
There was like a
roundhouse
family
pizza?
kind of thing.
I wish
A
there.
roundhouse.
No.
Round
How cool would a
round
roundhouse
table.
pizza have been? No.
Like a martial arts themed pizza place. Roundhouse pizza.
Yeah. Welcome everybody back into the only show on all of the YouTubes based on a single isolated memory from that game right back there, the original Phantasy Star for the Sega Master System. We've grown up. How many years has it been now? 30 odd years we've known each other? We gotta be pushed. No.
Something like that.
Isn't that scary?
It's gotta be longer than that.
30 years puts you back into the 90s. 30 years still seems like, that was just like the mid 80s for me. 30 years ago is 1994. So we're in the near 40 year range.
Yeah.
Damn, we're
How
old.
long ago was that match when Ultimate Warrior won the Intercontinental Championship?
That was WrestleMania 6.
No. It was Warrior versus Honky Tonk Man.
Oh,
When he won the Intercontinental.
You mean for the Intercontinental? Yes. Was that when he beat him in like 30 seconds or something?
Yep.
August.
That was the one.
August 29th, 1988.
So 88. So that was, I mean, we'd already been friends for a long time.
That'd be 36 years ago.
Before that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was that day we all came over and watched it at your house.
Oh, I was always the sucker shelling out $50 for the pay-per-view. Now you can subscribe to Peacock for $5 a month and get all of the premium live events because they have we used to have the big four, right? We had Survivor Series, SummerSlam, WrestleMania, and Royal Rumble, not in that order. Now they do one every month with other, ironically, intercontinental events. They'll do one in Saudi Arabia. They're doing one in Australia this year. So they have a good 14, what we used to call pay-per-views, but now they call them premium live events. So, So again, if you're new here, the whole point of the channel is me and a core group of my best friends from obviously now 36 years plus, I'm finding out, scattered to the ends of the United States of America, but we still keep in touch all the time and talk about this stuff. We usually have a great time. We thought we put it down on what we used to call Travis film or video, and share the best of it with you guys. So welcome in. I always like to start by asking Travis when I talk to him at the end of each week what he's been playing this week. So Travis, what you been playing?
Well, let's see. Last week when we talked, I had been playing Metal Gear 5.
Right.
Phantom Pain. But then I ended up getting the Callisto Protocol.
Yes, I think I have a copy too, but as will be the trend with so many games, I have not even booted it up yet.
Kind of a funny story on that one. So that one's kind of been on my radar a little bit, because I saw a couple videos about it and it looked really good. Plus, I was a big Dead Space fan of the original Dead Space.
Right.
And I think it's the same director is doing this game. So I'm like, okay, this is kind of like a Dead Space game. So that's cool. And it looks amazing. And so I've been thinking about it. Yeah, I might get it. So I'm going through there. I'm like, I'm going to get this game. So I'm looking. I go into my my library, and the game's in there.
I've done this.
I'm like, what the hell? So anyway, long story short, I had ended up buying it in December for like $6 because it had been on sale. I'm like, oh, I better get that. But I never played it. Probably because at the time I was playing Starfield because that had kind of come out around that time. So I never played it and totally forgot about it. So I actually had the game, and so I finally got to play it. And it's one of those maybe 2-day games, that you beat in like 2 days. But it was pretty good. So then after that, now I'm back to I'm restarting Death Stranding. That's another one. So if you don't know, Death Stranding came out with a director's cut.
Okay.
And the director's cut added a bunch of stuff to it, and but it's a separate game. But I found out you could actually get the update for $4 or something like that. So I went ahead and got the update, and I've been playing that. So I'm on Death Stranding right now, which is a great game, by the way.
Is it actual additional content, or is it modified? Is it a whole new chapter or something extra?
It's a whole bunch of extra stuff. They have extra vehicles, extra game mechanics. They have a new kind of mission you do. So yeah, it's got some extra stuff to it. I mean, it's worth the $4 definitely.
Yeah, for $4, absolutely. Hey, that's less than twice the cost of what horse armor would cost you for the original Oblivion, right? We'll go back to that one again. When the first people laughed,
how much was that?
$2.99.
$1.99?
No, $2.50. They were shooting the moon on the world's very first DLC, which was, we talked about before, literally just a different graphical skin of armor for your horse. I think it was cosmetic. It wasn't even like a statistical change. You would know better than me, because again, the guy, me, who played Oblivion for 2 years and didn't even know there were gates you had to close.
You didn't get that far in the story.
No, I did not get very far at all. So, like, for me this week, I really didn't have a whole lot of gaming going on. I made a couple of videos on that Disney Speedstorm racing game that I'm kind of hooked on, because I, being a ridiculous Disney adult, I'm kind of their target audience, except they've only gotten me for $15 since I started playing back in, pretty sure it was October. I just pay the money for the premium unlock, so you level up faster and you get a few extra things. But it's a fun, mindless game. I spend like an hour in the morning with it, just doing the daily quests and the daily missions. I'm like, like you, I have a copy of the Callisto Protocol. I have a bunch of games. We talked about, you mentioned beating games 7 times, and what do I say? Oh yeah, I have that game on my shelf still in the shrink wrap. I mean to play it one day, but with Speedstorm, yeah, it's like, oh, I could start this brand new game. Like, I really still have not got a chance to start Yakuza Infinite Wealth yet, and I want to. I'm like, oh, I even have a copy I got for like $20 of Harry Potter from last year. And when I think about sitting down and starting a new game and getting lost in the story and remembering what's going on, and then I know what's going to happen. I'm going to stop, and life is going to happen, and I'm not going to get back to it. And then I'm going to have 6 months from now, I'm going to have that like mid-stop and be like, I don't know what's going on. Maybe I should just start over. And I just have that like vision of the next 6 months, and I just, you know what, I'm gonna go race like 6 laps on Disney Speedstorm, maybe finally unlock Stitch as a character, go back to something else. So that's my problem, but this is the year I'm gonna start getting a lot more games done. So maybe next week I'll have a more exciting one for you.
Well, thank God they didn't, release that 15 years ago in your real Disney phase, because you probably would have,
I'm not so sure my real Disney phase hasn't ended. It's just I'm starting to get priced out of the Disney phase. Like, yeah, I would spend too much money anyway, but it used to cost me like $30 to get into Disneyland at the most. I still have an annual pass receipt for a premium Disneyland annual pass with no blockout days for $99. You can't even
Did you hear about that guy who had a Disney pass from like the 1960s or 70s or something like that?
And he used it because there was no expiration date, right? For Disney World, I think, in your neck of the woods.
I think it was like $20 or something was the ticket at the time. Some like way cheap price. Do you remember when we were, I mean, it didn't seem too long ago, but of course, even the 90s don't seem too long ago. But remember when for Southern California residents, it was like $20 to get in Disneyland?
Yep. Yeah, there still is a discount. There still is a discount of some kind, or with their new Magic Key passes, because they don't have annual passes anymore. I still want to say it's probably costing them like $500-600 a year, and I think they have like a good third of the year blocked out from being able to go into it. So yeah, it's different. Like a one-day ticket to one park now, it's a sliding scale. I don't know what it is over there in Disney World. I think it's base like $120 to go to one park for one day. For some people, that's like a big once every few years vacation. And I miss when I used to just be able to pop in and grab dinner or do some shopping or hop on Space Mountain and go home. Now that those days are over, and that's part of the thing is like those are the memories we have of a particular thing, and no one's going to get to have those again because things have changed, and that's what happens.
I can imagine, if you take your family these days, it's like you're paying $500 for a family of 4, probably more.
Oh, easily.
That's just to get in. Not to mention food and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's expensive.
Yeah,
that's what I get. You know how they opened up that hotel that was like Star Wars themed, and it was like $5,000 a night or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
And I guess they finally reduced the price a little bit. They're like, I guess that might be a little too much.
And then they reduced it to 0 because it closed down because they just weren't getting the.
Oh, did it?
Oh yeah, I think it was. Yeah, well, maybe, it was last year.
Maybe you should have just priced. You know what I mean? Like instead of just going from 5,000 to 4,000, why not maybe try to price it a little more reasonably? You can maybe tune down the experience a little bit, but like that's crazy. Who has that money to spend $4,000 a night on a Disney hotel.
Yeah, and I did watch
Or a
videos.
Star Wars hotel.
Yeah, I did watch some of the videos that guests would take, and yeah, for that price, it's a little bit underwhelming for what it was supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to interact. Supposed to interact with the actors playing the characters, and there's a storyline while you're there for the 2 days. But it kind of reminded me of just a Disney or Star Wars themed murder mystery weekend. It didn't feel like it was going to be something like, wow, this is going to blow my mind. You're in cramped rooms, supposed to be on a space station, and then the excursion was basically front of the line passes to the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge there, and you go on the ride ahead of everybody else and probably get lunch and then go back to the hotel. So, yeah, that's a lot for a confined experience like that. But
and you think about how much they probably spent building all that just to have it closed down. Like, just reduce the price, man.
Yeah.
Even if the experience is not quite, it's like when you go to the Lego hotel and you go into the room and everything's made out of Legos and it's kind of cool, right?
It's kitschy, yeah.
It'd still be cool to go to a hotel that's themed after Star Wars. I don't need to be in a role play situation or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, they were hoping to capitalize on that, but realistically, how big is the audience for that? And how many times are they going to go? Once you've tapped that market, that's not a repeat thing. Or if someone just has $5,000 at a clip, who's going to go to that? And even if you get the people who do, is there enough of a Star Wars fandom within that base of people with that much disposable income? And is that something they'd want to do? Because I'm sure it's the same storyline. It's the same events. Now, we all like repeat stuff. We watch movies over and over. Going to Disneyland, right? The rides tell a story, but you know what's coming. After the first couple of rides, you know every twist and turn. You know the surprise. You know the joke. Yeah, like I said, a $5,000 experience. Well, and speaking of that, and I'll move on to the next topic, they just rethemed what I think originally it was a DoubleTree hotel. Then it became the Disney Paradise Pier Hotel to mix in with their California Adventure theme park. Well, they just reopened it in the last 2 weeks as the Pixar Hotel. So, like you mentioned, the Lego store, it's got giant statues of the characters. It has walk-around people as the talking humans from Pixar movies. And then the rooms will have, like, theming, the Pixar lamp, like, lighting effect. From what I saw, from what I read, I didn't actually look it up like something like Expedia or any travel site yet, $500 a night for the room. And this is literally like what was of the 3 hotels they have, the bargain hotel. But it's happening.
And that's still pretty expensive, but I mean, it's not $4,000.
Yeah, but
I mean,
but a family goes for 3 nights. A family goes for 3 nights. There's $1,500 just in the hotel. And then, of course, parking. I don't know I forget if California has resort fees, because here in Vegas, they just jack the resort fees up. I want to say it's like MGM Grand, it's like a $58 a night resort fee on top of whatever you're paying, which again is for your newspaper, access to the gym. So there's 2 things everybody comes to Vegas for: reading the paper and going to the gym, and then your internet service, which literally you have probably better internet service on your phone's mobile.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that even drives me crazy is that these hotels have the gall to charge you to park at their hotel.
Yeah. Well, that's
like, when did that start?
Well,
you know what I mean?
And then it moved to Vegas almost a decade ago, maybe like 8 years ago, and the hotels keep switching. Oh, we don't believe in paid parking, so parking's going to be free. Oh, they opened up a new experience or an exhibit, like, that sphere that they built out here. You've probably seen it in videos or something, right?
Yeah, with the big face on it. And
so it's so close to the Venetian and the Wynn that those hotels were not charging for parking, but now they're afraid of everybody parking there and then Ubering or walking over to those venues. So now they are charging for parking, unless, of course, you're a certain tier of player level. But yeah, so it's changed the way it was. We just had the Super Bowl. You might have heard of that thing. I know you're not a sports guy. Most watched Super Bowl, I believe, in history. The most well executed. Now they're talking about maybe having the Super Bowl, or they're proposing it. Like every 5 years, it's in Vegas, because they made so much money off of it, and they handled it well, but the city was a mess. And it's always a mess, because they say the state bird in Las Vegas is the crane, and they aren't talking about the crane on the ground. It's the building crane, because there's always construction somewhere. Anyway.
Do they still have those buildings there that were never completed?
So no, Fountain Blue finally opened up this past December. That was one of the ones that sat half built. You like the skin was taken off, and you could see. I think ever since I moved out here in 2008. So for well over almost 13 years, 14 years, from everything I've seen, I haven't gone yet. It's deserted. Nobody's going there. And then Venetian still has, they were building what were to be like luxury rentals. It was on top of one of the towers, and you can still see that they have a scrim or that kind of clear screen that they usually put in front of construction, but they did artwork on it like you're actually looking at the side of the building, and it blends in very well. But yeah, that's been there, never finished. So we're going to talk about arcades today. I can't even imagine. When would you say the last arcade as we knew it legitimately? That wasn't just a building trying to get people in to win tickets and be full of DDR machines. When you would actually walk in and there would be the brand new Street Fighter II cabinet or Mortal Kombat or all these random games. Like, that hasn't existed in forever.
Well, do you remember the one that was in like Burbank?
Pinball Plus.
Pinball Plus, yeah. Like, when did that close? Do you remember?
Well,
because that was the big one. I remember.
I'm gonna look it up out of curiosity. I actually met the guy one time because I built myself. I built myself a MAME arcade cabinet 20 years ago in April. It's gonna be 20 years old.
Yeah,
I'll put a picture.
I remember it.
Yeah, you did see it. I went to the guy who used to own Pinball Plus because I don't know if it's still there. I think they're just a sales and service place now in Glendale. And I bought an authentic Ms. Pac-Man coin door for the cabinet. And I'm looking up really quick. Here we go. There's actually a website called Arcade Museum that you can look up arcades that existed. And so I am going to go to the P's. Yep, Pinball Plus 2 and 3 in Burbank. Doesn't have any links on for there, but yeah. So I'm thinking they were gone by the time we were out of high school, or I was, because
it wasn't just even the arcade building that you can go to. When I think of an arcade growing up, it wasn't just where like Pinball Plus was just a business that had a bunch of arcade games in there, and you'd go and you play the arcade games. But also, the arcade experience was also, at Shakey's Pizza, at Straw Hat Pizza, at Roundhouse, at places like that.
Did you say Roundhouse Pizza?
Kind of venue.
I wish there
Roundhouse.
How cool would a Roundhouse Pizza have been?
No. Like a martial arts themed pizza place. Roundhouse Pizza. It gives you a kick to your pizza.
But yes, you're right. We did have the little cubbies. They'd actually have like maybe a quarter of the dining area blocked off or walled off, Waldorfed, and you'd have like maybe 8 or 10 machines in there and a token machine.
Yeah, like Shakey's right there over by McCambridge Park. I mean, that was the place to go.
Yes,
they had a whole lot of arcade games. You got your pizza, you get your
They had
soft
2 rooms of arcade games, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was the left and the right.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I remember, so I would always beg my dad to take me to the arcade. He usually would, and he'd give me like, you know what? I can't even imagine how much he gave me in quarters. Like, I would just ask for more quarters and tokens and get them. And he'd sit there while I played games for like 2 hours. But for me, the excitement was walking in and wondering what was going to be like a new game. What's new this week?
Right.
I literally had butterflies. Like, he would drop me off in front while he found a parking spot. And I'd be like Christmas morning, opening up that door and walking in, seeing that there was a new machine right up front or some colorful graphics on something lit up that drew your attention.
Not only that, but you'd always run into the arcade friends, the ones that you
don't know what school they went to. Do they even live in this
city? You don't even know their name.
Yeah.
You're just like, hey man, you ready to play some this and that? What were the big go-to arcade games for you? Like when you would go to the arcade?
I mean, what really era? Because you know how spoiled I was. You know how often I went. Look, let's tie it to the channel, the memories, right? What memory sticks out more than the game itself? I have a couple. I remember when Paperboy came out. I was kind of friends with the arcade owner, so a lot of times they'd open it up when it was slow and open the machine and give me free credits. And I remember like that was so cool to have the controls. I can literally see in my head, the way I remember it, exactly where that was physically placed in the arcade. Now, if I could see it again, I could be completely off. But I recall working so hard to perfect that, where I could get through all 7 days of the week and be perfect on every single day. That stood out. Clearly one of the other ones, since I spent the money on nostalgia and bought the arcade 1-up version of Dragon's Lair. Don't forget, we saw that in the arcade. We had like a cartoon that we could play. But the one thing about Dragon's Lair, aside from always having a crowd around it, there was a movie theater on State Street in Santa Barbara. So when I was a kid, my mom would want to go shopping. My dad would take me and drop me off, and I'd play in the arcade. Dragon's Lair was so popular, they have a machine side by side with a giant, large CRT on top of it, also broadcasting what the person was playing. And you couldn't even get in, but I remember like being fascinated by that. Dragon's Lair, Space Ace. I remember when Double Dragon came out and you could play two people together in the arcade and you could play against each other, right? You get that jerk who would want to go ahead and beat up on you instead, because at the end too, you had a fight to win. You had to square off if you were playing against somebody. But I used to remember I always wanted to play that game solo, and people would always come in, and how do they tell you it's going to be their turn next? Do you remember?
Put a quarter on the...
You put a quarter up on top of the marquee?
First player, yeah.
Or next to the... Or on the buttons, yeah. And then you knew where your quarter was, man. You're like, I'm the third quarter from the left. This guy's the second quarter. And if you didn't put up enough quarters and you wanted to continue, I was that jerk who'd reach back in and just put more quarters in. I'm not getting off the game. I'm sticking on.
I always did that too. Like I think it was just like when you're done, that because there's always expectation that you can continue your game.
Yeah.
When you're done. Yeah, I don't know, but I would always just put it in. You remember, speaking of games that you could play, like multiple players, do you remember when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out?
Absolutely.
And it was like 4 players. And dude, that game was like, everyone was on that game. That was so much fun.
That is still one of the most popular beat 'em ups. I think if you rank it, it's usually that one in The Simpsons. And we go to 7-Eleven.
Street Fighter.
Yeah. It was usually like a pinball machine, Street Fighter, and towards the later stages, it would just be like an SNK Neo Geo system, because they could put multiple games in there, even though it was always Baseball Stars, Magician Lord,
that spy game,
the spy one, and one of the oh my gosh, which was the SNK? Their Samurai Showdown is that series, or King of Fighters. So, but what did you play when you would go?
Man, so my biggest memory is Shakey's Pizza. That's the one that
you mentioned. Shakey's a few times on the program. Yeah.
Shakey's, Straw Hat Pizza, the one that used to be over by Conroy's Flowers.
Mm-hmm. Shout out to anybody from Burbank watching who remembers all of these things. Conroy's,
Burbank,
Blockbuster on
which
the corner.
is gone, right?
Burbank, that
Spectre's Market.
Oh my gosh, Spectre's. Spectre's. But yes, I'm sorry. So Shakey's and Straw Hat. Yep.
Yeah. So, but for me, like I always enjoyed Golden Axe. That was like one of my favorite arcade games. I love Golden Axe in the arcade. Shinobi, and I mentioned that before. I think Rastin you couldn't find in too many places. That was kind of an older game. I remember playing that at Chuck E. Cheese back before Chuck E. Cheese, when it was Pizza Time Theater.
Yep.
And by the way, let's just stop for a second and digress. For those who never experienced Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater, like you missed out. Like what you know as Chuck E. Cheese today is not the Chuck E. Cheese that where you at that we grew up with. You know what I mean? I mean, it was awesome. You remember when you'd go in there and they'd have the hippo playing the piano, and they'd have the rat playing the freaking Elvis and stuff.
And it was just the head, right? It wasn't the full body animatronics. At least the pizza, the Showtime Pizza I went to, it was actually a stage. It was a stage, and they would have doors, almost like the Country Bear Playhouse.
That was one part of it.
Yes,
they had in one part, but then like near the entrance, they'd have the I think it was a hippo playing the piano. It was like a full freaking piano with a giant animatronic hippo, and she would sing. And then there was the Elvis rat, and that was like a giant rat with the guitar and the jumpsuit on and everything, and it was singing. I mean, it was awesome. And then it was like every 10 minutes it would start playing, and it would stop for a while, And then they had all the arcade games. There wasn't really too many of the, those stupid ticket kind of machines they have now. They were just like classic arcade games. I remember playing Rolling Thunder. What the hell was that one? Moon Patrol. Oh. Yeah, like all those games.
I remember Moon Patrol. I remember playing so much Moon Patrol at the Shakey's.
Spy Hunter.
Yeah. Yeah, the sit-down Spy Hunter, where you sat inside of the cabinet and you had the buttons there for your oil slick and your smoke screen and all that. Yeah, I still to this day feel like I can remember the taste specifically of Chuck E. Cheese pizza and the root beer that you would get in the pitchers. Because if we went to the same
Yeah.
one, I'm not sure because I wasn't driving at 8 yet, so I don't know exactly
I don't
where
remember.
we
Yeah.
went. But I remember the showroom area was set up like a beer hall almost. So long tables, and they bring it to bring it to you, and you'd have the pitchers of soda and the pizzas and the salads,
Hmm.
and there was a whole separate giant room that was actually the arcade area, and they always had tickets and games. That's what they make extra
Yeah, but
money
not
off
like it
of.
is today.
No,
Yeah.
that's all
It
it
was
is.
mainly
It's
like a
either
little bowling thing.
skee ball. Yeah, it's like skee ball or maybe like a
Mhm.
basketball hoop thing, and you get tickets. Yeah, nowadays if you go to any arcade, it's all basically either a basketball hoop, a plunger. Go with Dave and Buster's, right? Dave and Buster's is the perfect
Mhm.
example. They have like some really cool 4-player sit down like Mario Kart games, like things I haven't seen before. But there's nothing exclusive to an arcade anymore because gaming surpassed that, and people are like, why am I going to go here to put a quarter in for maybe 3 minutes of entertainment on average? Like, God forbid you're
Mhm.
playing one of the shooters, right? All the shooter games, the gunnery games, the rail games, those are made to just suck your quarters, right? You could be the
Yeah.
best player ever, but at some point there's 17 missiles coming at you at once, and with a guy popping up and an axe coming this way too, and there's
Yeah. You're
just
not
no way
gonna.
you can do it. You have to
Yeah.
pay at least five
And
or
even
ten
if you
dollars.
do, there has a time limit, so you still
Yeah,
run out of time
you're
anyway.
up against it, but you just want to get to the ending, which was usually very disappointing because you're done. Get on, get the next person in here so we can make some more money. But yeah,
Yeah, so it was the the Sega games, Sega arcade games, the Taito, they were a big one.
yep.
They had Double Dragon, they had Renegade, they had a lot of great games. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a great game. But those are the ones I remember. One of my favorite arcade games that I don't think ever came out on a system that I know of, like any type of version of it came out, was Crime Fighters. Remember that one? It was
I,
like a
I
four-player game.
I remember the name, and I'm gonna type away on my loud keyboard and look it up really quick because I do remember. Oh, I recognize the logo. Oh my gosh, yes, I remember this. That's like an early
I
version.
love that game.
Yeah, that's like an
Yeah,
early version
that
of
was a
one of the
really
4-player
cool
beat 'em
game,
up.
and it was 4 players, so like everyone could go on there and play together. It was just a cool game. You could knock people down, kick them while they're down, and you had weapons.
We
And
can't forget about one of the original 4-player quarter munchers.
which one is that? What are
Think,
you talking about?
think, which one? Like,
4-player quarter muncher.
like if I said which is the truth, I legitimately haven't eaten anything today, and I need food badly. Gauntlet, baby.
I'm drawing a blank.
Gauntlet.
Oh, Gauntlet! God damn, Gauntlet!
Wizard is
Yeah,
about to
it's been
die.
so long
Needs
since I
food.
played freaking Gauntlet.
That was a
Yeah,
game. Talk about quarter munching because
yeah.
and the game was so simple, right? But like you had to go ahead and beat up on the monster generators, and it starts off easy. Like, okay, I'll just go ahead and throw the axe. You had the 4 different characters, different skills. You throw the axes. Everybody has ranged or something close up. But the second you could run into enemies to fight them too, but at the cost of your own life. And when
Well, even if you just stood still, your life would go down.
your
Remember?
life, I was gonna
It
say
was
your
almost
life
like
would
a
go
timer.
down. And then once you kind of started getting a beat, what did they introduce? Freaking death. Remember, he'd walk around with the finger pointing.
It's been so long, I
And
don't remember that
there
one.
was no way to beat it unless you used up your precious magic potions. So literally, once like, hey, you got good at this game, we're just gonna throw death at you. Go ahead and take that. And so I never got to the end of Gauntlet. I do believe the arcade one has an ending or
I
some
don't think I have
level,
either.
but I'm sure it's like 100 something levels. Let's see how many levels. Take a guess. What's your best guess? How many levels does Gauntlet have?
I'm gonna say 25.
Oh, get out of here. Go. It's 125 level maps. 100,
Holy
114 regular levels, and then 11 of those treasure levels, which were just bonus rooms where you could stock up on stuff. There were no enemies.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
I mean,
was that thing like a procedural generated game?
no, that actually was not. That was set. Some of those exits would warp you ahead. But still, 125 levels, I can't even imagine if you were to try and play through that 1 through 125. I mean, how long would it take? And I'm sure there's out there
Yeah.
too. But yeah, so 1985, so almost 40 years ago. 40 years ago next year was one of the original 4-player quarter munchers. It was brutal. It was
That
brutal.
was a good game too. Like it. I think if you still even were to look at that game today, it probably still looks pretty good. Some of those arcade games, like those early arcade games, we don't really think about it because we were playing, the Master System and the Nintendo, and so we kind of saw the evolution from a console standpoint. But really, before, like when Nintendo was out, these arcade games are pretty damn advanced. Like if you go back and you look at like the graphics and everything, they looked freaking awesome.
Forget like Dragon's Lair, we know now was just a cartoon on a laser disc. Right. So, but when you're 8, it's kind of mind blowing. But yeah, remember how realistic cartoon looking Neo Geo games were, right? Mm-hmm. And you go in the arcade because you couldn't have that kind of stuff at home. And then when you finally did, you always had some variation. Like this is random, but I remember having a ColecoVision as one of my very first systems with the Atari 2600 add-on console. The majority of ColecoVision games were missing one of the levels, so it was never the full experience. And then we got the Nintendo, and boom, there you go. Now you got the full version of Super Mario Brothers. It's still tweaked a little bit. That's kind of cool. But then you'd go, and you'd have... I remember one game that was out there where it was tanks, but you had the 2 tank controls, and you could go over a jump, and it was a big, tall screen, like maybe easily like a 4 or 5 foot tall screen. And you go over a pad, and it would launch up the tank, and it would scale the graphics up. Right? So they were basically blocky, and then it would land down, and you would go play that because there was nothing like that at all in the arcade, or at home, I mean, because the machines just couldn't do it.
They couldn't do it, yeah.
Which kind of leaves...
I was kind of surprised it was a lost opportunity for SNK when they came out with the Neo Geo. Like, they should have just released a bunch of those arcade games that could never be put on consoles and just made like a direct port, you know what I mean? And they never did that.
Yeah, it was only until later on when they started to appear like on the Super Nintendo. Like that was mind-blowing. I remember I was actually in New York when I saw the advertisement that Street Fighter 2 was going to be put on the Super Nintendo. And I was like, oh my gosh, how are they going to pull that off? Like it's not going to be good. They're going to have to cut back on things. And that was a really good port. I remember even buying one of the first 2-player arcade sticks with the 6 buttons on both sides. I had a friend come over and he was like, wait, what's this? He wasn't a big gamer, but he liked Street Fighter. And he's like, well, you don't have Street Fighter. They can't put that on the system. And I show it to him and his mind was blown. Now,
yeah, it's awesome.
Now we're looking at graphics that are hyper realistic. We're just so used to it. So that leads into the last thing. I want to, because you have kids and I don't. I have nephews who are big gamers. In fact, one of them is coming up this weekend to visit. And he refers to me as a gaming god because I helped him beat the last level of the recent Kirby game that was out for the Switch. Like I didn't actually, like it was his game. And it's like, oh, it's tough, but maybe you can help me figure it out. We beat it the very first time. Because look, I got 48 odd years of recognizing patterns and anticipation and stuff like that. He's got at the time he had 13. Here's my question: is I was talking to my wife about games that have came out 20 years ago, before they were born. And I'm thinking about series like, okay, you got Sonic the Hedgehogs, right? Okay, you can look at Sonic the Hedgehogs and say, those games, for some, except for the 3D versions, have almost stayed the same. Disney guy, right? I play Kingdom Hearts. The original Kingdom Hearts came out in 2001. If you're like a 13 or 14-year-old now, what do you think it looks like to look back and say, oh, this game that part 3 is out now, part 1 and 2 were out before I was born, and there's a storyline that follows these, right? Because when we looked at old games, we'd see pictures of like, well, it was in the arcade too, to be honest, but Pong and the old radar machines they would use to tweak to make line graphics. And like that looked like older to us, but not that old because it wasn't that long ago. Right. So I can't even imagine what it'd be like to be 15 or 12 or 10 now and look back and say, oh, that old game from 2002. Like, do your kids ever look at the retro stuff and be like, that's interesting? Or play a game and say, hey, I'm playing this version. I want to play Dad's version.
Well, not so much like I like this version or that version. So like my youngest son, we've got the little mini Nintendo and the little mini Super Nintendo. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
$4.99. I found that at Goodwill.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah, I got
awesome.
that. I got that one, and I got my mini Genesis right here. I was actually using these for streaming the other night, which, by the way, look at Cake in a Cave on Twitch, streaming sporadically right now. A lot of your retro favorites. And speaking of Golden Axe, me throwing the controller trying to play Golden Axe the other night, because forget it. That game was never that difficult.
You're positively hustling, man.
I used to be. I'm sorry, but I'm still. Go ahead.
So I had those, and I hacked them with the hacking software and put like 1,000 games on them. But so like we play games that we never even had when we were young, because we didn't even know they existed, or you didn't have the money. But now it's all there for us. But yeah, so he likes the original Metroid. He's played a lot of the original Metroid.
The NES one, like original OG
NES
Metroid.
one, yeah, the original Metroid. He played that one, and then after playing that one, he really got into the Super Nintendo Metroid, Super Metroid. He liked that. We played a couple times. We played River City Ransom together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he plays those games and he likes them. He usually gravitates more to the Super Nintendo, but he also likes playing games on the regular Nintendo as well. But yeah, he likes those games. He enjoys them. He plays the original Super Mario. I think he played Super Mario 2. But that's nowadays it's mostly Roblox. Kids can't get away from Roblox.
Is Roblox like Minecraft? Oh God, now I'm gonna sound old. But is it?
Honestly, no, I don't think it's. I mean, it's kind of blocky like that, but I think Roblox is more. It's almost like a platform.
You can build your own stuff in it, right?
You can build your own stuff, or other people can build something, and then they put it up there, and you can go find all these different games, and then some are more popular than others.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's like when I was younger, they would bring out games like the Pinball Construction Set, or Bard's Tale had like the Bard's Tale Construction. They're all called Construction Set, and they kind of gave you the tools to make your own adventures, but of course. Nothing like the mods and stuff you can get for Skyrim now. And
yeah, like some of these games are pretty incredible. Like, it's not just like, for instance, let's say, Mario Maker, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can make a whole bunch of different Mario.
Exactly.
So in a sense, let's say like Mario Maker, where you can have a service where everyone could put their Mario Maker levels up. But it's more than that, because it's more like a gaming engine in a way, where you can just create your own content. But that's different than so Mario Makers, it's always just going to be the Mario Maker assets and all that
right.
kind of stuff.
I know what you're talking about.
They almost like they mod these things to be a completely separate game, but based on Roblox in that engine, or that.
We had the time to be super creative, like make our own art, make our own fantasy Final Fantasy style game would have been kind of fun. And if I know us, we would have made characters based off of people from school. So let's take a look at one last thing. We totally kind of buried in the beginning. Where is the one I'm going to do? Let's take a look, because we're talking about exclusives and things in the arcade that we got to play that you couldn't just have at home because the systems weren't there. And we had the console war generation, right? Super Nintendo versus or Nintendo versus Sega, and then maybe TurboGrafx is over here in the corner, like, hey, remember me? I have a couple local games.
Philips, the 3DO,
and people would want to get a Genesis to play Sonic. And they want to get Nintendo to play Mario or Metroid. So now we talked 2 episodes ago about was Microsoft getting out of the hardware business, and now the announcement came that they pretty much said that they're not going anywhere in terms of hardware, but they are going to be bringing 4 Xbox exclusives to the PlayStation and the Switch. So this is kind of the equivalent of the first time Sonic appeared with Mario, like in Sonic and Mario at the Olympics, or the fact that he's a character in the last iteration of Super Smash Brothers. Phil Spencer from Microsoft, the CEO, basically said, we've made the decision that we're going to take 4 games to other consoles, but they are not naming the first 4. Now, this is taken from The Verge, so they have their own sources where they claim to know what the first 4 games were. If you had to guess 4 games for the Xbox that would be exclusives, what do you think they are going to be bringing to another platform?
Well, first off, I've never owned an Xbox, so I don't even know what freaking exclusives they have, but I'm guessing probably Halo, Fable was one of the big ones, right?
Right.
Those are the only. I don't know. What other games did they have that were exclusives?
The ones like recent days, I was thinking one of the ones.
Gears of War, maybe? Was
Gears of War was an exclusive, and one of the ones I was thinking they might bring is the Forza Horizon series. Because,
that's
but
a racing game, right?
So here's my question. So let me finish reading the article. So now, whether or not this is true, again, everybody has a source. But off of TheVerge.com, they said sources familiar with Microsoft's plans say the first 2 titles will be Hi-Fi Rush and Pentiment, followed by Sea of Thieves and Grounded. Do any of those 4 games even ring a bell to you?
I think Sea of Thieves, isn't that like a pirate game?
Sea of Thieves, that's the one that I really recognize.
I've heard of that one. I haven't heard of any of the other ones.
And then I did remember Hi-Fi Rush because last year it was a surprise drop on the Xbox Game Pass service. It's kind of cool. It's a combat fighter that was music-based. So if you would actually time your attacks to the background music, you would gain boosts and power-ups and special attacks. Do you think this is Microsoft testing the waters to see? Because those are 4 interesting games that I don't know if that's really going to... PlayStation already has, like, Gran Turismo. So,
well, speaking of the
doesn't make sense for a big game.
Something that they're actually thinking of the same thing, that they're talking about possibly bringing their game. So now it's okay if Xbox is going to put their games on other systems and PlayStation and Sony's going to put their games on other systems. What is going on? Because, like, why do you need a Sony, a PlayStation, and why do you need an Xbox if you can play the,
right?
All the games are going to be on any of them. So at some point, the sales are going to go down. I mean, they're already down. But, like, if there's no real reason to buy a PlayStation, then what are you going to do? You just buy the cheapest one, or maybe you're going to buy the one with the best graphics. But, they all build the games. If they're all going to be for every system, they're just going to build them to the lowest common denominator, like they do with the PC games when they started coming out on these consoles. So I don't know how that's going to work, man.
What I'm thinking, because again, they're trying to probably think like, and I don't even want to say 5 or 10 years down the road because things move so fast now. So even like 3 or 4 years down the road, we used to always say, like, video game consoles got to the point where they're basically mini computers with a specialized task, right? We go back to the console wars. Okay, well, you wanted a Super Nintendo because it had Mode 7 scaling. Well, you wanted the Genesis because it had the better FM synthesis chip. You wanted the TurboGrafx because it had more colors on the screen. These games introduced different, like, features and upgrades that you couldn't do on the other one. Nintendo seems to be the only company still doing that because every new hardware thing they release is either gimmicky or some kind of advancement, right? The Game Boy was was the first portable system. Everybody else followed along. Then we have another version of the Game Gear with a color screen, and then it's the 16-bit version. Then it's dual screens. Then it's 3D, ultimately leading to the Switch, which I kind of think Nintendo's going to maybe stay. There's always rumors of the Switch 2. Nothing's concrete yet. But I think they're going to kind of stay with that hybrid. Like, plug it into the TV or take it with you, because Nintendo's target audience is Nintendo game players more than anything, right? Ports are usually kind of half-assed, to be honest, on the Switch of major games. It can't handle it, but it's really good at handling Mario games or Donkey Kong or whatever's coming out recently. Well, a lot of Mario games, actually. The Mario Wonder, the remake of Mario RPG. They put Metroid Prime on it. I finally got to play Metroid Prime again because I lost my GameCube copy. Speaking of, like, valuable games, and I always wanted to play it again. I didn't want to emulate it. I wanted to play it on the actual hardware. And to get a copy of that was like $100-something. So I got it for the Switch, which of course is on the shelf, still in the shrink wrap. But to go, what I was saying is, maybe we're moving to a spot where they want you to stream, right? If broadband is getting much more available, but I think for as many places as it's available, it's not good in every spot. Like, we were having a little bit of connection difficulties. You told me earlier, when you were playing Callisto Protocol, you kept going in and out of being online. Like, you get the warning that you were Death Stranding, and we had a little bit of a problem with the video at the outset because of lag. So for you may be able to stream a game, but you can't stream it at the highest resolution possible because the bandwidth wouldn't be there. But if these companies only have to develop one game, and then they go, here's the software, here's the Game Pass platform, here's the PlayStation platform, we'll give you the software so you can run it on your systems. Maybe you have like a $300 Asus laptop you get on sale from Best Buy that can now run your game. So you kind of reach a whole other audience that wouldn't normally have played the game because they didn't want to shell out $500 up front or $400 to get the Xbox to play God of War. Now they can just pay a subscription fee or buy the game and play it on any piece of hardware. that takes the burden and the expense off of Microsoft and Sony. And that could be how they envision the future.
Isn't that what Google was trying to do back in the day with Stadia?
Back
You could
back in the
literally
day,
plug
being
your
2 years
controller
ago.
into the TV.
Yeah.
you could. It was longer than 2 years ago, but you could plug because that was like 2012 or something. I remember them talking about Stadia.
I should say, I'm sorry. Stadia closed down 2 years ago, I think it was. No, it launched in 2019 and it closed down. Well, it launched in November of 2019 and closed in January of 2023.
Is that when the beta launched?
No, this was the service debuted in closed beta October 2018. Publicly launched November 2019. Closed down January 18th, 2023. I think that's kind of what they want to do is like, we don't want to get tied into having to upgrade the systems. And then a developer, remember the thing with Baldur's Gate, is it going to be on the PlayStation? Is it going to be on the Xbox? They say it can't handle it. If these developers are making for a common platform or a common style, it's like make a game in Unity and maybe it's going to scale itself down if it's going to be on the Switch. Like games have the fidelity and the frame rate mode. I usually prefer to play with the higher fidelity and the better graphics. I know it's not as smooth. I am not somebody, for the most part, who cares if it's 30 or 60 frames a second. But I'd imagine a lot of those options might have to be lost if you, like you said, you have to write for the lowest common denominator. And even streaming, if you're streaming 4K games and you're playing a marathon game like a Infinite Wealth, where you could spend upwards of 100 hours, I don't think we have the infrastructure for something like that yet. But I think this is them testing the waters and being like, what if all we have to do is publish games? We buy studios, we invest in the games, and then we sell the game. And then eventually, what if all they have to do is sell it digitally? You don't need a physical copy. I think that will greatly increase their profits. I think that's what they're looking at, right? Is like, how do we do the least and get the most out of it, rather than support it like, okay, this system's 5 years old, now we got to design new hardware, and we got to make it worth somebody wanting to spend another $500 on. You know, I remember people, when the original Xbox came out, they went out and they bought the Xbox and an extra controller and whatever else just to play the original Splinter Cell. And maybe they bought like one or two more games, and that's it. So they went out there and they literally paid over $400 to play one game. And I think that's something that we don't have, especially in this economy, is disposable income for people who want to play games. Well, I got $70, because remember, games are $70 now. I got $70 to play this game, but I don't have the $400 to get the console. And that's why I think Microsoft is leaning so heavy into testing the waters on their games on other platforms. And like I said, their Game Pass service is great. I like the fact that I can go buy Infinite Wealth and I can play it on the computer and on the Xbox. I don't have to buy a copy for each like we did back in the old days. That's one part where digital copies are nice. Or maybe you do an exclusivity. So basically and they've done this for a couple of games in recent times, for the first 6 months or a year, it's only available on the PlayStation service. And then it'll move on to other services as well. So whether it's hardware-based or just streaming-based, they can. It's like when you cancel Netflix because you don't watch anything anymore, and then suddenly a new show comes out. You know what? They know they're going to get you for at least a month or two because you're going to pay just to binge watch that show, and then cancel again. But it's a way to get money from you. And I think the gaming industry is kind of taking a page out of streaming services, where they just want to go ahead and release the games, make their money, and not worry about having to be the hardware provider for it.
Well, the other thing too is, I mean, if you really look, I don't know too much about the Xbox, how they're doing, because like I said, I'm not really in the Xbox. But like for the PS5, so PS5's been out for a while now. I mean, they just released a statement from Sony saying that it's kind of coming to the end of its life. I feel like the PS5 just came out, but it's been out for a while now. But I think one of the reasons why I feel that way is because there's really kind of not that many games for it. I mean, it just seems like it's very underwhelming. Why is that? You know, what's going on? Because, I mean, they're a big publisher. They should have had a whole bunch of these really great games. And it just seems like as time is going by, like you look at the PS4, there was a ton of awesome games for that. PS3, ton of awesome games. PS5 really just kind of like, especially like for exclusives and things, it's just not there. There's nothing to get excited about. Maybe Spider-Man, so if that's going to continue on, then like why would you want to buy a PS6 if you just spent all this money on a PS5 and you never even really got any value out of it?
Well, that's very true, because as we talked about, I didn't get a PS5 until last December, so a little over a year ago. And the only actual game I've bought for it was Final Fantasy 16, because I thought it'd be the best on there. And I haven't bought an actual game since. I've got a couple I've downloaded, and a lot of what I've downloaded have been like remakes of older games I wanted to play or never got to play, or off of the PlayStation Plus service. And I did see the article you're talking about. I think the way they phrased it was it's more than halfway through its life cycle. So does that mean it's going to be a refresh? Does it mean they're going to try and do what they usually do and release another scaled down version after last year's kind of failed attempt to scale it down by taking out the drive, but then selling the drive separately if you wanted it, and the stand separately if you wanted it, which by the time you added it together, it was cheaper to buy the original PlayStation. I think Microsoft said they're going to be making some new hardware advancements. I've even heard the rumor that they're going to start working on a portable Xbox. But I could see Xbox maybe with their Game Pass, because like I said, on my Steam Deck, one of the first things I did on the Steam Deck was, other than installing all the retro stuff on here, is I found a way to get the Game Pass website set up as an icon in Steam, and then I can log into Game Pass and stream all my Xbox games to the Steam Deck. And it works great. So I think they see the Steam Decks and the Asus ROGs and all of those portable computers now, and they're like, maybe that's a trend we can get into, because then we kind of got them wherever they go. They're not tied down to a physical box and a controller. If they got a phone, if they got a laptop, if they have access to a computer anywhere, now we can get them back in. And I think that's kind of what they want to do, is be more ubiquitous service.
That's what Nintendo did, right? That's what the Switch is. How do we do our own Switch and make it more powerful? Because can you imagine, like if the Switch 2, if all they did was make it exactly the same but increase all the specs on there so that it can actually play, games that could be released on a PS4 or PS5 or something, that'd be incredible. You know what I mean? Like those games, and they have such good games. Like, and I've never played them, but I see my kid playing, like, and they look pretty incredible. But like, they're still limited to that Switch hardware. Can you imagine if they had released that game for like the PS5?
Yeah,
it would have been unbelievable, right? And it's funny too, because I mean that's kind of they've made those, the PS Vita and all this kind of stuff, but they just didn't really sell like the Switch has. So what is it about the Switch?
Well, I think maybe we can
so different. You know what I mean?
I think maybe we can tie that together. The thing with the Switch is Nintendo's business model is predicated pretty much on games you can only play by having a Switch, right? So they kind of tie that up by having exclusives. PlayStation Vita, aside from the fact that the format they went with, when Sony did the PSP and they went with their little UMD discs, like, okay, so now you got to be, it's like when Nintendo refused to move to CD-ROMs. And even when they did, they went with that custom smaller GameCube disc with its own format. They just would not go to something that's industry standard. With the Vita, you had the little, the memory cards. With the PSP, you had the UMD discs. So it didn't make it easy for developers, this closed system where you have to develop it for this specific machine and its hardware. So it goes back to this, is if you can just design the game you want, and there's a platform that takes it in and spits it out to a variety of different systems, then we start having people, maybe they allow somebody to customize the software somehow. So, hey, there's so-and-so's version of the Game Pass service, but hey, here's ours, like Android phones, right? I love my Pixel because it's just pure Android operating system. You get a Samsung Galaxy, you get all the Samsung crap. I've had both. Yeah. And you get all that crap on top of it. You get their customized version of the dashboard, their customized version of the OS. When a patch comes out, you have to wait for Samsung to have the Samsung version of the patch, whereas with Google Pixel, you get the day one patch because it's the raw operating system. I think that's part of it, is I think the system before for portable games was just not like, it wasn't friendly for developers, because you want to make it for the PSP. You want to make a game that will also be on the PSP. Well, make sure it can fit its data on a UMD disk. You want to make it for the Vita? Well, make sure it conforms to these technological graphics standards because we have to shrink down the quality because can take the battery life into consideration. You want to imagine back in the day if you wanted to make a game that would playable on the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, and the TurboGrafx. They all did scaling, but they all did it their own way. So that's why I think in my old retired IT terms, they want to become like a software as a service that people can put the games into that, and this software delivers it to whatever hardware. Kind of like the joke, like toasters can play Skyrim now. There's been a version of Skyrim for everything. There was even a version of Skyrim for Alexa a number of years ago that was basically a spoof made by Bethesda where it would give you a verbal walk through a dungeon and a fight. So I think that's what they're looking at is what do we do to get this stuff everywhere possible and just spread it to the whole market. And I think that's going to be good for Nintendo because they're going to be able to capitalize on people who just want those games and know they can't get them anywhere else. And they'll do their incremental upgrades. We'll go from this version to the OLED version, and then maybe they'll throw something new in, like a funky feature or gimmick device on the next one. Although I think they've kind of moved away from gimmick devices after, like, the 3DS was cool, but not necessary. And motion was so cool in the beginning. Look, I'm swinging a tennis racket. And then you realized, oh, every game I'm literally just shaking the controller to cut the carrots, to reload my gun, to swing the bat, to have surgery on the patient. Whatever it was, it's just waggle the controller. And people want something different.
Nintendo, too, they're so good at, I mean, because if you look at a Nintendo from a spec-wise, like, why would you even want that? Right? It's the lowest denominator of all these systems. I mean, I don't even know if the Switch could play like PS3 games. I really, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But somehow they make them super, like, they make good games. And that's the thing with Nintendo is that they took on the philosophy of, doesn't matter how powerful our system is, what matters is how good our games are.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the things that Xbox and Sony has kind of lost. It's like, yeah, you've got this real powerful system, but what are you doing with it? You're not doing anything with it. You know what I mean? You got a Switch is kicking your butt, and all those games are fun to play. Even though the system's not really that powerful. But so, what are you going to do with it? You know what I mean? Like, there's games on the PS3, I think, that have or has a better lineup than what was on PS5.
Yeah. Well, look,
there's nothing good on it.
Like you said, it's 2020 was when the PlayStation 5 came out. Granted, most people couldn't get one for like a year.
Yeah,
it's now 2020.
Maybe that's why it seems like
it's now 2024, and like you said, they're announcing these systems are beyond half their life cycle. Where is my PS5 Uncharted? Right? They made a really cool PS5 Ratchet and Clank that I played for a bit because it was on the PlayStation Plus service. Really amazing showstopper. They can do a lot of cool stuff with that console and with the controller to interact with the game, like making the trigger buttons have more force behind them, so you feel like you're actually pushing onto something. It's great, but that gimmick aside, where is that system killer? Like you said, God of War Ragnarok is great. Horizon Dawn is great, but it's better than the versions that already existed on the PS4. Where is that killer app? Where is that one that someone pops in and says, look, this is the system seller? And I don't think I think you had people who enjoyed the consoles and wanted the next God of War and wanted the next Horizon Zero Dawn. You didn't get somebody who said, wow, I've never had a system, but I'm looking at this game and I have to play it, a la the Splinter Cells and the Halos. How many systems did Halo move? Right? And so, so it's a different era. It's a different world. It's not going to be, and your kids are going to be having a conversation maybe in the next 30 years. If the Apple Vision Pro thing catches on and everybody's just wearing the headset, maybe we're in that Ready Player One universe where nobody interacts. We're in the same room with each other, but we're interacting through the virtual version of that world.
It'd be like Wall-E.
I always think about that too. You see a lot of people are actually returning their Apple Vision.
I guess they're about to, that return
window. The 2-week window is about to close. Look, I be honest, last time I had my MetaQuest on intentionally, like to actually sit there and play a game or do something, might have been late November, and I just got that one in October. It's cool. I have a copy of Asgard's Wrath too. I was thinking about maybe because you can record footage off of that to the computer. Because that's the one I told you. Like in the original one, you can go into the tavern and you can. Well, it's not going to be a Starbucks cup, but you can pick up the cup and you clink glasses with the guy in the bar. And they said this is basically the killer app for the headset, and it was free. They made sure you got a free copy if you were an early adopter of the headset. And it's also like a 60 to 80 hour game. I'm not sure I want to play a game in there for 80 hours. Not even, it's like I get a little bit of eye fatigue. I don't get motion sickness or anything. Sometimes you want to just sit there with the controller like this.
Yeah.
And even if I'm sitting there with, I'm okay, I'm looking over here. Oh, here's this enemy. Okay, oh, what's over here? It's, again, like you just said, it's like Wall-E. It's a lot of physical motion. I kind of don't want to do that for that long. You know, I barely want to sit and play Yakuza for 80 hours without taking giant breaks in between. And, of course, battery life, right? So I got to either be tethered to something to play that. So I think a lot of these people, we saw the videos, real or fake, where they have the headset on, they're walking around the street on a crosswalk doing this. We were talking last night. Look, it's as it was put to me, it was called a rich kid's toy. I definitely think for a subset of businesses, there's applications for this. For a headset in general. At $3,500, maybe not.
Yeah.
At $1,200,
especially in the closed ecosystem of Apple.
Yeah. With my MetaQuest, I just stream my desktop to the Windows, and I can use whatever I have, but it's not going to be optimized for that. And so I think there's always the Apple Premium. I had my stint as a big Apple guy. If Apple charged $1,200 for a VR headset with those features, I could understand it. I could see that being, this is an Apple product. This is where Apple's at. And it definitely has some improvements compared to other, the MetaQuests and the HTCs and stuff. But $3,500, that's a lot to ask somebody to be an early adopter of something that really isn't introducing something brand new. So I get the experience with that, but I don't think it solves a problem in a better way that we haven't solved. You can't see it. I have 4 monitors here, right? That'd be cool if I could have a monitor here and over here instead of just right on top of me. But it's not a problem that isn't solved in some manner already, and not for $3,500. So I'd like to see them come out with version 2 and see what they do, maybe a year or two down the road. And that's the thing too. I had the MetaQuest 2 since actually I got it when I got the Xbox, so 2020, right? Okay, fine. After 3 years, ask me to spend another $500 to upgrade. That's fine. But I can see Apple releasing a version 2 of this within the next 12 months. Now, what are you going to do? Even if the price is less, you're asking somebody to come in and now spend $2,200 on version 2. They better damn well have a trade-in program and figure, something like that.
We're talking about Nintendo's next big thing. What if they made if their next system was a virtual reality system? It would probably be crazy, because they're going to make a bunch of interesting games for it, and you're actually going to enjoy playing it, and you're going to have a lot of stuff to play. And that's the beauty of the Switch and Nintendo. It doesn't matter how crappy their systems are; they're still fun to play.
Do you remember when they tried to do that with the Labo, the cardboard construction kit set for the Switch?
Mm-hmm.
And they had like a VR thing you could build, and like it worked for like 1 or 2 demo games or something. But yeah, no, you're right. That's where Nintendo is like, we're focusing on making the games that are fun. And look, they're not for everybody, right? A lot of people still call them baby games. There's games on there that are just truly fun. Like maybe, sure, it took me all of 7 hours to beat Mario Wonder, but I had fun doing it. I'm not going to go back and do it again. I got my money's worth, more or less, out of that. And it was an original, fun style game I'm not going to play anywhere else. That, to me, would sell a system. When it's like, hey, you can play the games anywhere you want, that becomes less important. And I think Nintendo is like, well, we're not going to do that, because now if everybody's sharing their games with each other, we still have a core audience who wants to play Zelda and Mario and whatever variations we make of those characters. And they're going to get them with the hardware and the software because they can't get it anywhere. So I think in a way, Nintendo's like, sure, you want to give us your exclusives, Microsoft? We'll take them. But we're also going to be doing our own stuff too. So I feel like Nintendo might benefit the most from that kind of ecosystem. And The only thing that scares me is this means that the major companies would have to focus more on the publishers, and how many development studios have been getting bought up and closed or going under this year. And
Speaking of studios going under, did you ever play that game?
I'll just say this, whatever game it is, I'm pretty sure it's on a
Oh, I looked
shelf
this
in
up.
my game room, still in the shrink wrap.
Disco Elysium.
I do have a copy of Disco Elysium in my Steam library that I got on sale. I have a copy of Disco Elysium that I got for free on the Epic Store. And then I'm pretty sure Disco Elysium is also available for free now on my PlayStation Plus subscription. So in a way,
Disco
yes, I have
Elysium,
it, but I've heard it's really amazing.
it's an amazing game, but the studio just announced, so they had some kind of big lawsuit between like the original writers and their partners or whatever. So basically, the entire team that was the blood and guts and the machine that created Disco Elysium is now gone,
Oof.
and it's just like a corporate shell. So that, there's probably not going to be any more of those games out there for like Disco Elysium unless the original writer creates another studio and does it again. But like that kind of stuff, is sad because there's so many studios out there that have closed down, like, that had made great games and they're just gone now. Like remember Raven and, like even in Bethesda, like all the great people that were making the original Elder Scrolls games, they're gone. So, when Elder Scrolls 6 ever comes out, it's going to be a completely new team,
I
Is that gonna have the
actually
same magic?
I found the article talking about that from just the other day. Disco Elysium expansion reportedly canceled with a quarter of staff at risk of redundancy. It's the third project canned in 3 years. So yeah, I guess they were going to have a standalone expansion, and that's been canceled. Although it does say it's around 24 employees set to be affected. But still, that's what keeps happening, right? Microsoft bought up Activision Blizzard. Now you have two companies with completely redundant staffings. And what did they end up doing? That kind of sparked the whole debate about 2 weeks ago about the hardware in general was, we're shutting down the physical media department. But you also have duplicate HR departments and duplicate marketing departments. And so it's a shame that companies are having problems. They seem to release a game, spend 3 years working on it, and then the companies just shut down. Or Microsoft buys Rare, right? I mean, Rare, maybe Rare was going to be a few hit wonder, but it does seem like once Rare got bought by Microsoft and they were no longer a Nintendo exclusive, the games weren't special anymore.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I have a little theory. So, Microsoft bought Bethesda, right?
Yes.
And I feel like, so Bethesda has been pretty on spot with their games. When they say their games are coming out, that's when they come out, right?
Right.
So Starfield originally was supposed to come out in like November of 2022, I think.
Delaying it,
pushing it back almost a year. And they say, to polish it up and this and that, but I don't think that's what it was. I think it was because when Xbox bought them, they're like, no, you're going to hold this off because we want to release all these other games before that. It became more of a business thing, and it's strange because, like a lot of like the for instance, Pete Hines recently retired from Bethesda, right? And like a couple of their other, I think, kind of lead programmers and stuff like that, and writers that have left. And I think it's because they don't like what Microsoft is doing. That's what I think. So I think that Bethesda, I'm pretty sure, Todd Howard has already mentioned how he might be retiring. Xbox, they're being a little too heavy-handed with these companies instead of just like if I were going to buy Bethesda, that's great, but let Bethesda do what Bethesda does, because that's why you bought them in the first place. But when you buy them and then you're like, okay, no, we're going to start dictating how you're going to do this and what you're going to do. And then people start leaving because they're like, this is no good anymore. Like, then what are you going to have left? It's going to be like Zaum, where you have the name Bethesda, but all the people that made it great are gone,
Right. They're going to market it off of the name. Like, think about Atari's been doing that for almost decades now. Atari, the company, isn't Atari from our childhood. It's Atari in name. And then they release something to kind of tap into that childhood memory, but that's not granted, with the age of the company, it wouldn't be the same people either. But you're right. It's kind of like when the name just still gets applied to something, but it doesn't even carry the same spirit as the original developers or the original philosophy. And that could be a race too. Maybe when the companies ditch out of hardware, if they're going to go like, no more exclusives, is okay. Now how they get exclusives is being able to buy up the developers. So the game may not be exclusive to this console, but the game is exclusive to this company. So if somebody goes and gets a big name title and Microsoft owns, maybe they buy up that production studio, and now Sony wants that game on their system too. Well, now are we talking licensing rights? Are we talking fees? Are we talking like, not rentals for them, but like how many times will they'll say, hey, yeah, you can have this game and the license is going to be $1 million a year, whatever, right? Because there are games out there, not to digress, but there are games that will never be released again because maybe the game has like a copyrighted song in it that they paid the licensing fee for. The game's not going to sell enough copies anymore to justify renewing the licensing fee annually, and the studio doesn't exist, or no one's going to go back in and replace the song because you didn't think about these things, back then. So now, unless you have a ROM of the game or somebody has a dump of the game, it's not available anymore. So what happens if Sony says, okay, sure, we want to have Halo on the PS5. What's the licensing agreement? Oh, $10 million a year? Fine, we're going to do it. And they do it for 3 or 4 years. If they decide to cancel, what's going to happen to the players who then got that game on the PlayStation 5? So I didn't think about that earlier, but that's a whole other topic that could happen. Whereas how is that non-exclusivity handled? Is it on the developer to make a version for that other platform? Is it on that platform to pay the other company to have it? Because in a way, then you still have, it doesn't mean everything is going to be everywhere. It means these companies are going to work with each other. And when you have a Baldur's Gate or a Starfield where it looks like it's being exclusive to a system at once, if the other system really wants it, can they get strong-armed and be like, well, we're either going to lose all these players to their ecosystem, or we're going to pay the money and capture some of it. So it might create a cutthroat situation that I think it's all like speculation, because it's going to really have to play out and see how these companies work with each other. Like I said, that suspected list of the 4 games, I think Grounded is one of the ones where I think it's like a multiplayer game. Sea of Thieves, same thing. Multiplayer, sailing on the sea, have a crew with your friends. And then you have 2 other games that were known but exclusive to the systems, not necessarily big system sellers by any means. So maybe it's testing the waters and seeing, will we ever see a Halo on the PlayStation or an Uncharted or Ratchet and Clank on the Xbox? I mean, the money is going to have to be there for both parties to want to agree to that.
All these systems are going to be different. So you would have to make like a localized version, right? Because like you can't put, some of these PS5 games on the Xbox because the Xbox can't handle it. So we get to that same situation, like when the early Xbox and was coming out, and you would have like, I always use the example of Hitman 2. When I bought Hitman 2, that game was PC only, and it looked fantastic. I mean, it was incredible, right? The graphics at the time. And then like 2 years or 3 years later, Hitman 3 Contracts came out. It actually didn't look as good as Hitman 2 because they had released it for the consoles as well. So now it became built to the lowest common denominator.
Right.
And if you're going to be releasing games that I could play on this and I could play on that, I feel like that's going to happen again, right? Because like you can't release a a new Xbox game and then play it on the PS4,
right?
Because it can't handle it. You know what I mean? So how's that going to work?
Well, ultimately, too, let's not think in terms of that every single thing is going to be available, right? It's going to be selective, and there might be something that might be still their ace in the hole. Because I'm taking this to the extreme where there's no more physical hardware. So if there's no physical hardware, everything's digital. So you are playing it on your downloaded version, and maybe within certain Xbox, because you need that middle tier software, right? You need that platform that will then take the software and run it. Otherwise, it's just like a PC game, right? What if they make dedicated hardware? But anyway, so you have that software layer. Well, who's to say they're not going to put special features that are accessible and say, hey, look, make your version of the game, make it for the lowest common denominator, but if you want to put these kind of features in there that are active only if you have this system, you can do it. Again, something we brought up before is when Soul Calibur came out, right? It's the exact same game, but if you bought it for the Nintendo, you got Link as a character. You bought it for the PlayStation, you got Kratos. So that's a way of saying, hey, it's the exact same game, more or less, but there's something different if you choose to get it through us. This is our value add, is we're going to add something extra. Remember, back when games didn't have achievements and trophies, right? That was a feature that only one console started off with. And everybody kind of, so if you bought the other version, you didn't have that. Now everything has trophies and achievements, and they're not even the same on some systems sometimes. We are just getting started. With conversations, playthroughs, and shorts, we aim to keep your favorite memories alive, as well as helping you to find new ones that you just didn't know where to look for yet. Be sure to find us on Twitch, Instagram, and coming soon, even TikTok, and we'll catch you next time.